The First World War is impossible to comprehend if we only see the list of the millions of the dead. For me, a descendant of those who fought, I hope I can begin to better understand that history through the personal histories of others like me. Many of us, particularly in Germany, have lived with a silence within our families concerning this terrible war and its legacy that haunts us. In 2016 came this unique opportunity created by a special group of British and German organizations that met and with great care, through listening and creating ideas together, worked out how to bring descendants together. 24 people are meeting in my country, speaking of the war and its impact on their families across generations. It begins with an echo from Christmas 1914, a meeting in no man's land when German and British troops met to exchange mementos and show photos of family back home. All of us have one thing in common, that the war from 100 years ago still lives within each of us. At this first meeting, my heart opens as together we look at these fragments of stories we carry within us so often of broken lives. Listening to the other side, our enemies as our ancestors saw each other, I hope we come to a new understanding of the past and its impact. This coming together of descendants from Britain and Germany was not created to be a mere peace exercise, but it is for me clearly a sharing of pain, of disorientation, but also of emerging love and friendship through a deep understanding of the stories of others.
She volunteered to be a nurse in the local Red Cross hospital in Buxton.
Im Februar 1916, das war ja kurz vor dieser Schlacht an der Somme. Und ich kann mich also gut erinnern, dass er am Hals eine ganz tiefe Wunde hatte und am Arm, wo also diese Granatsplitter ihn verwundet haben.
Picture of my father when he signed up for the army in 1914, and he was in France when this picture was taken in his Highland kilt of the Cameron Highlanders, and he was, as I mentioned earlier, wounded at the Battle of Arras. The captain for whom he had the highest regard, and this was a man who was regarded highly by the senior officers in his regiment, he died at the same burst of machine gun fire as my father was wounded. And he gave me my middle name Stuart after the captain. And my wife and I gave our son Alan the middle name Stuart to perpetuate this strong feeling that my father had about the captain and his regiment.
So when the Second Battle of Arras took place on the 23rd of April 1917, the machine gun fire hit them as soon as they came out of the trenches over the top. And that was when Captain Stewart was killed. And my father was with him and was hit by the same burst of machine gun fire in his lower part of his left arm, fracturing bones in his lower arm. And he landed on the ground beside Captain Stewart, and Captain Stewart just said to him in a low voice, "Go back to the casualty station, Marson."
Das ist ein Familienbild meines Vaters. Der älteste Sohn, also der älteste Bruder ging in den Krieg, und zwar 1914, und blieb dann im Krieg bis auch mit Gefangenschaft 1920. Im Februar ist er wieder heimgekommen, gesund heimgekommen. Das ist die ganze Familie.
Wo führt denn das hin mit diesem schrecklichen Krieg? Ich glaube, dass der Krieg noch lange dauert, liebe Gattin. Das hat er 1916 schon. Die Schrecken, die wir in dieser heute Nacht ausgestanden haben, kann ich dir gar nicht mitteilen. Wir waren alle bereit zum Auslaufen. Das heißt also, sie waren alle bereit, dass sie geschickt werden. 20 Minuten von uns wurde ein Dorf beschossen. Wir denken uns immer, jetzt kommen wir als Nächste dran. Liebe Gatti, habe diese Woche eine schwere Arbeit, muss auch bei Nacht arbeiten in einem Unterstand mit 12 Meter Tiefe. Mit lauter Lehm haben wir es zu tun. Furchtbar ist sowas, und ganz nahe bei den Vorposten. Wir sind die marschieren und die sind so nah, dass sie bei uns vorbei marschieren. Also die sind sehr nah gewesen und sie waren im Graben drunter. Das hat heute geschrieben.
I wonder, as the British travel to our meeting place, what is going through their minds?
I guess there'll be human stories in the same way of loss and sadness. So yeah, I'm sure there'll be great similarities in how people dealt with them and responded to them. So it's just, yeah, it'll be good to have this human connection.
I think the Germans sometimes, they tend to be quite conciliatory, and that's great. But I want to show that there's no residual resentment of any sort in the current generation, you know, in Britain. But also, I'm fascinated to reach out to somebody and, you know, help them reconcile their, you know, sadness and things like that.
Und es war wirklich ein großes Geschenk, dieser Moment, weil es war nicht so einfach, den Start dieses Projekts hinzubekommen, weil Kriegsgeschichten ist in Deutschland nicht ein Thema, das sehr geliebt wird. Und ich habe also wirklich viele Absagen bekommen, und dann habe ich mit Karin gesprochen, und dann haben wir gesagt, und wir zwei, wir machen uns auf den Weg. Das, ja. Genau.
Ich verstehe jetzt, also ich bin jetzt offen, es ist offen, ich weiß nicht, was kommt, ich bin offen, weil es war getrennt, es war vielleicht seit 1918 bis heute getrennt alles, in zwei Welten, die nichts miteinander zu tun haben.
Um mich auch vielleicht einzufühlen in die Gegenseite, wie die das erlebt haben. Ich weiß so wenig von unserer Seite, und ich denke, es kommt darauf an, eine Begegnung zu machen, zu hören, zuzuhören, sich da einzufühlen und über diesen Weg vielleicht auch sowas für einen selbst, für die eigene Familie, aber auch allgemein für die Gesellschaft, so etwas wie eine Versöhnung zu erreichen oder so. Ja.
I've never done something like that, so it's a first time adventure.
The question is simple. Some of you might not want to answer it. You don't have to answer, but the question is, why are you here?
This question opened a space for us.
I'm here because I think my grandfather would have thought this was a wonderful thing to do, and I think he would think, wow, a relative of mine is going to talk about his life.
Also ich bin hier, war als kleines Kind, war man öfter auf Besuch bei den Großeltern, und da war oberflächlich schon über den Zweiten Weltkrieg so gesprochen, aber schon damals habe ich gemerkt, irgendwas ist da aus der älteren Zeit, und das ist mir dann immer klarer geworden, dass das eigentlich der Erste Weltkrieg war. Und der ist aber nicht groß diskutiert worden, der war noch mehr tabu, das war irgendwie ganz besonders schlimm. Und da geht auch nicht so richtig was weiter in der Familie und deswegen ist das, glaube ich, eine große Chance, wenn hier die ehemaligen Gegner, wo man sich ja mit denen unterhalten kann, das ist, glaube ich, eine Riesenchance, die Sache aus einer anderen Sicht zu sehen.
I'm here because I think that history is often written, firstly, from the viewpoint of the victor, secondly, that it is portrayed as the deeds of great men, and I mean men usually, and actually, as we all know, it's ordinary people who create history all across the world, and my uncles and my grandfather were ordinary people, and I wanted their voices to be heard. And at the end of the day, I think everybody has more in common with each other than has ever divided them.
Also ich bin auch hier, weil ich meinen Großvater aus der Vergessenheit holen möchte, weil in meiner Familie der Zweite Weltkrieg auch alles überlagert hat. Und ich habe 3 Söhne und ich merke vor allem auch in meiner Herkunftsfamilie, wie schwierig es ist, über diese Sachen kritisch zu reden. Und ich habe an meinem Großvater auch eine Seite entdeckt, die mich irgendwie stolz macht. Er war ein sehr einfacher Mensch, kam aus sehr ärmlichen Verhältnissen und hat vor allem in der Zeit nach dem Krieg immer wieder Widerstand geleistet. Er hat sich nicht vereinnahmen lassen. Und das ist auch eine Seite, die ich weitergeben will, ja, also für die jungen Menschen.
If our forefathers could see us now, together in this room, what would they feel? Particularly those who never spoke.
I wasn't quite sure what to expect when we began this discussion.
Das ist ein Bild von meinem Vater in einer Gruppe seiner Kameraden. Er ist der ganz Kleine hier. Er war 18, als er in den Krieg eingezogen wurde. Und ich finde, auf dem Bild sieht er aus noch wie ein Junge. Und er hat viele Karten heimgeschrieben an seine Eltern und hat immer gebeten, sie sollen doch öfter schreiben, und er wartet schon so lange auf Post. Ich denke, dass er sehr viel Heimweh gehabt hat. A card from my father. I looked at it like that and then I found the letter. Liebe Eltern, heute ist es Sonntag und so ziemlich dienstfrei. Wir hatten nur Kirchgang und mittags frei. Zum Essen gab es Grießsuppe, Hackbraten und grünen Salat. Es wäre ganz gut gewesen, wenn nicht die Suppe um 1 Uhr, der Braten aber erst um 4,5 Uhr mittags fertig gewesen wäre. Warum schreibt ihr so lange nicht? Habe nun schon seit einigen Tagen nichts mehr erhalten. Gestern sandte ich euch im Päckchen eine meiner Winterunterhosen zum Aufbewahren sowie Seife, über die ich schon vor einigen Tagen schrieb. An der Front ist es zurzeit viel lebhafter. Ob die Engländer wohl was vorhaben? Wahrscheinlich ja. Unsere Flieger sollen ja auch Tanks beobachtet haben. Anbei einige Bilder, die den Krieg im rechten Licht zeigen bei unseren Stellungen. In Bälde, Meer und Grüße und Küsse, Hans.
This is a picture of my grandfather, Robert, who came from Scotland. He was in the Battle of Messines and the Battle of Lewes with the London Scottish. And then he was a photographer and an observer with the Royal Flying Corps. He was wounded 3 times, concussed twice when his aircraft crash landed, and missing for 3 weeks. I'm lucky to be here today.
I think it was sort of mid-September that they went to France. And really, his story begins with the Battle of Messines, which happened on October the 31st. And it was basically a battle around a windmill
and they were surrounded on three sides by Germans. But I do know that they had terrific losses. There was out of about 750 men, I think it was nearly 400 died in one night. He was wounded at Messines, so we know that it went in near his spine, on his shoulder, and it came out around the hip bone, which seems remarkable to me that it had travelled through his body that much. I've been told by somebody recently that my grandfather used to say that he lost his appendix with that bullet.
Das ist eine Karte von meinem Großvater von 1915 auf eine Baumrinde geschrieben. Und er schreibt die besten Grüße aus dem Beresina, er war in Russland. Und er hat ganz viele Karten selber gebastelt aus Blüten, Blumen und Bäumen. Und dass die überhaupt noch erhalten ist, da bin ich sehr froh. Also er war ein großer Kriegsgegner, hat in Russland, musste nach Russland und war da gerade eben verheiratet. Ein Kind ist bei der Geburt gestorben, das zweite kam während des Krieges auf die Welt und er war sehr weit weg in Russland. Ich habe es jetzt erst herausgefunden, wo, Berezina. Und da hat er später erzählt, dass die Menschen in Russland so sehr, sehr arm waren. Also viel ärmer, als er gewohnt war. Und hat immer gesagt, er versteht nicht, warum wir da Krieg führen. Er hat es sehr verurteilt. Ich habe auch immer das Gefühl, er hat ja während dieses Krieges diese so schöne Postkarten gebastelt mit Blumen, Blüten. Also ich denke schon, dass es sehr schlimm war, aber in der Bevölkerung, dass die Soldaten da sich ordentlich aufgeführt haben. Ich weiß es nicht. Aber es sieht da sehr friedlich aus. Ja. Also das ist das Einzigste, wo man versuchen konnte. Beresina Wald hat er geschrieben. Er war im Beresina Wald. Es ist auf Baumrinde eine Karte geschrieben.
This is the notebook of my great-uncle Cliff. He had survived 3 or 4 battles and many years in the trenches and finally left the army with tuberculosis. When he was dying at home, he couldn't speak, so he wrote in this book when visitors came. He also wrote prayers and his thoughts about his service and about his family. And in the end, his family also record what he said when he was delirious and dying. And it's quite a heartbreaking book to read.
Clifford, I know, was an artist. He had some of his paintings published in books. In particular, he was a wildlife artist, so he would illustrate bird books and things like that, which he must have been doing in his teens, because I'm not sure how much he could have done when he returned from the army. This is Percy with his Herefordshire cap. This is Clifford, who's the eldest. And this is my grandfather, Walter. All I know is that they were loved and hugely respected, and their loss had a huge effect on the whole family, but especially the brother, my grandfather, who survived them. My mum's dad survived until I was about 25, 26 years old, and we were great companions all the way through. I would just ask him questions, and silly questions, you know, about guns and whatever, as a kid. And he'd never talked to anybody, but he opened up to me, and we would just chat about it, not for history or posterity or anything like that. We just talked about it. He'd never talked to his wife or his daughter, which is my mum, but he told me about the trenches, and he told me about his brothers' lives. When he became much, much older, into his 90s, he was a little bit confused. And in his declining years, he retreated into his shell completely. So I would go at lunchtime to see my gran and my grandfather, and I'd get a nice meal, and I'd sit down with him and just chat. If he was talking about the olden days, It was lucid, he was enthusiastic, he came alive. He was a founder member of what became known as TOC-H, which is the Tubby Clayton-inspired charity. In Poppering in Belgium, he had this estaminet, which was, you know, you entered there and there was no rank involved. Officers would mix with soldiers. It was a Christian organisation, but it was about every soldier. And they returned from the war and set up their own little branches like this, which became formalised in the 1930s. He was relatively fragile by his sort of 80s, so he wouldn't be involved in their meetings other than as a sort of president, leading the prayers and things like that. But they had a bookshop in town, which I volunteered at. So I'd be sitting there with, you know, I don't know, half a dozen, maybe 10 of these old veterans, chatting around, you know, about their First World War, and obviously there'd be some Second World War guys there as well. I don't remember selling many books. It literally was, you know, I'm just going to sit there and take all this in because they were wonderful. And most of them really nice old boys as well. So you were, that was my Saturday, you know, volunteering.
Das ist mein Großvater, 1914, wo er noch optimistisch war und in den Krieg gezogen ist. Und danach war er nicht mehr im Krieg, es ist ihm ganz schlecht gegangen. Und ich hoffe, dass wir alle daraus etwas lernen. Von meinem Vater habe ich das. Also mein Vater hat erzählt und die Hauptgeschichte war seine Verletzung. Er war 1916 in der großen Schlacht von Verdun, glaube ich, ist er verletzt worden. Da war ein Schuss durch die Lunge durch und ein Herzstreifschuss und durch den Arm wieder raus. Und er ist dann tagelang, also 2 oder 3 Tage im Schützengraben gelegen, weil oben die Artillerie geschossen ist und sie haben ihn nicht versorgen können und da war er kurz vorm Tod. Und erst nach 3 Tagen haben sie ihn rausholen können. Er war dann ein halbes Jahr im Krankenhaus und dann wieder zurück an die Front.
We are so moved by the extraordinary family experiences that we have begun to exchange, showing each other love letters from the trenches sent home to waiting wives and children. A last family photo taken as a memento before leaving for the war. Diaries, photos, tokens from the battlefields. Hearing each descendant share the story behind the precious and delicate family artifacts. We brought to life our ancestors' experiences, here in the present.
All these small meetings between 2 persons, and sometimes it fitted so well together.
Very intensive to speak about this thing for more time.
Liked it very much, but it was very short. We have to talk so much and the time is so short. So I think we must have 4 weeks to be together.
I think it was important to have that one-to-one, very personal contact.
We are visiting a German war memorial. Commemoration of war is very different in our countries. What concerns my country is that the First World War is overshadowed by all the cruelties of World War II, especially the horrific Nazi crimes.
Es ist schade, weil wir ja alle dieses Erbe haben, ob wir wollen oder nicht, ob wir uns berühren lassen vom Krieg oder ob wir die Schrecklichkeiten anschauen oder nicht. Sie sind da.
I work on family relationships and the First World War, and I was very interested in what Age Exchange was doing because I've worked mainly on Britain, and the idea that you might get together with German people to think about how family legacies of the war might compare was for me really fascinating, and I just don't know of an academic study that's doing that kind of thing. but age exchange is.
I think academic history tends to divide itself much more into much more clear-cut divisions. So you have German historians and British historians. There's some work, isn't there, on disabled veterans, I suppose, that looks at both. But in family relationships and legacy of the war, it's very limited, full stop. And to look at it in a cross-national way is very unusual.
And also just generally that this is a project which is about more private and intimate kinds of histories of the war. And what's happening is that German people are being brought together with British people who often have very private sorts of stories that they're bringing out for the first time, not just to a general audience, but to an audience of people who were once, as descendants, of opponents. So, you know, it's a very interesting thing to try and do.
Although I think one of the things that struck me is how the intimate family stories cannot be disconnected from these great national narratives of what the war means, and the way they kind of leach into each other has been very striking, I think.
I'd say that it's particularly noticeable in the German stories that we're hearing, that you can't understand the First World War without understanding the Second World War, and they're very interlinked, and the feelings, the legacies that go from the First are then intensified in some ways by the Second World War. It's more possible in Britain for people to talk about the war separately. Much harder here.
Today was the workshop. I thought really they were starting directly. Nobody would say, oh, what do I do? No. They did, they started and they let them go. And I think this is the way it has been prepared through the day today. Because we had this getting together, we could talk, we had those both lines, you know, we were really close to each other. And this is, I think, it went so well, and people were happy to do something, and they were happy to talk about their pictures. It's like a gift to the person. It is, you showing a photograph is different. You show, and you can have a lot of respect but when you do something for this person, this makes a difference.
In October 1918, he was awarded a Medal for Bravery. They were attacking at a place called Neuville, which is near Cambrai in northern France. And they had to attack across a river. There were no bridges, so the engineers had constructed bridges, but when the attack began, the bridges weren't complete. So my granddad jumped in the river and he held up the bridge with his hands for for the other soldiers to cross over. On one occasion, in his garden, the neighbour annoyed him because the neighbour had lit a fire to burn off some garden rubbish. And there was a lot of smoke, too much smoke.
I can imagine.
So my granddad walked up and down grandfather walked up and down the garden, shouting at the top of his voice, "Gas attack! Gas attack!" in order to display his annoyance at the neighbour, to embarrass the neighbour. So.
What's very interesting, so I have a lot of, that's just a little juice of postcards, I think of 1907 or 8.
Yeah.
So he had been in France and Netherlands and so on with bicycle.
Wow.
And he was very interested in culture.
Oh, right.
As I am also.
Yes, yes.
But a lot of photographs of destroyed churches.
Oh, in France?
In France, he had also, photographed, and you see, at first he saw them admired, complete,
yes.
and then, so this are some drawings of my grandfather, who was in a Nachrichtenbataillon, Telegrafenbataillon.
Yes, so signals regiment. Yeah.
And this is also interesting. It's a photograph of Schützengraben.
Oh, wow! Look at that.
Yes.
Whoa.
A trench.
A trench.
Yeah. Whoa. No, it's not 5-star accommodation, is it?
But I think better than the English.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised.
No, I heard, but of course you had the tanks. So.
Yeah.
Ruth, I think your father and my father, they have been at the same place in the war. In Ypres.
Absolutely, yes, they were indeed. Oh my goodness, yes. But this is your father, is it?
Yes, it's my father.
Right.
Before he went to the war, he had a last photograph for his parents because he did not know if he will come back.
No, oh no. He looks so young there.
Yes, I say it's a boy.
Yes, absolutely.
I think there, in those times, the childhood was much more longer than today.
Well, yes, indeed.
If I look at my grandson, and so I think they have earlier grown up.
Yeah, they have, yes. Well, this is my father. I don't think this was taken at Ypres, but there he is. There are two of him. So see him. He wasn't very tall, as you can see, but
he wasn't tall.
so they were both small.
But he had a much beautiful cap. That's not.
Oh, I like that one.
No. The British Army gave them better hats.
Yes. Oh, right, yes.
That's why they won the war,
yes.
maybe.
Yeah. But between the pair of them, look at all that destruction. I mean, it's appalling, isn't it? Really. The destruction of the houses and everything.
They had this house to put in the die Granaten.
The grenades.
Yes.
Mines.
In the
mines in
cellar.
the garden. Oh, in the cellar. Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
And then a bomb fall into the house, and all that exploded.
Oh my goodness!
And there were 10. He writes 10 men down in the cellar, and they could not bring them out because it was filled with water after that. So this is the card he wrote to his parents.
Yes.
Also Bombenschlösschen in Handekurt. Ich kann es nicht ganz gut lesen, das Wort. Wo ich ja auch lag. Drinnen war im Keller unsere Kaffeeküche. Vor 3 Wochen hat ein Volltreffer die im Keller lagernden Handgranaten entzündet und ca. 10 Mann kamen im Keller und liegen noch drinnen, da der Keller von hereinströmendem Wasser angefüllt ist. Did he later on write letters to you? Do you have some?
Oh no, he died when I was 4. So so no, I haven't. So that's why these are so precious.
Mm-hmm.
But this is one that I really like because he says, "I'm still in the same dugout that we are going forward today. The place is absolutely filled with lovely roses. The smell of them is delicious. I shall indeed be sorry to leave them and enclose you one of the buds, so you shall have some small share of their beauties, though I fear it will be dead before it reaches you." This is near the end of the war, yes?
Yes, and he was hurt.
Was he?
He was injured.
Yes.
Injured, and so at the end of the war he had been in the hospital.
Yes.
In Bavaria.
In Bavaria. Well,
So he had not maybe it was the end, this battle for him.
Right, yes.
And
because that's when my father was gassed. Right at the end, in October 1918. So that's when he came out and went into hospital.
Yes.
Well, what a similar pattern both of these men had.
Yeah.
This is my grandfather as a boy with his mother.
And they lived in one room, in a apartment with more families.
Meine Großmutter mit seinem Bruder, Jerry, und sein erster Haar als Kind.
Ich habe dann gesucht in Archiven. Ich wollte mehr wissen als... Mein Vater hat ja was aufgeschrieben über seine Eltern. Er hat da ein kleines Buch gemacht, weil er war Buchbinder. Er hat Buchbinden gelernt als Lehrling. Das war mal die Mutterseite und die Vaterseite, das habe ich schon ein bisschen erzählt. Er ist aufgewachsen in München, 8 Jahre Grundschule oder Volksschule und dann die Bäckerlehre. Und er wollte sich vorbereiten für die Meisterschule. Er wollte einen Meister noch machen in seinem Beruf. Okay. So, und dann war 1914. Und 1914. Genau, er war dann erstmal, das habe ich dann gefunden, in einem Archiv, das heißt Kriegsarchiv, und gibt es in München, und ein Kriegsarchiv nur für die Soldaten im Ersten Weltkrieg aus München. Und da habe ich dann gefunden, ich habe das dann recherchiert und übersetzt. He was in this
Christian
Bachelor group. And they wanted to make a theater.
Okay.
Yes, and they are meeting. And it was in May 1919. This group are meeting and training the theater. And the Freikorps came, thought they are communists, and they all murdered 21 youth men,
so
young men.
All of these men were...
Yes, and my grandfather had to work at night on this day.
But he didn't go.
And I wasn't not here.
This is really the story of many, many people. Because my grandmother became a nurse, Krankenschwester, in her town, Buxton, in the north of England. There are many things in this, and there's so many different stories here. But there is one story, which is this man, here they're in dramatics, and it's this man. And his name is Strickland, Sergeant Strickland. And there is something between Sergeant Strickland and my grandmother. I don't know what their relationship was, but I know that he gave her something. And this is what he gave her.
Yes.
This is the last part of the story. He gave her this kreuz, and that's his letter. On the night of the evacuation of Schön, the remainder of the civilians were leaving Rosières. As we passed through Rosières, the Germans were bombarding the town heavily. A shell went through a house and wrecked the back portion of the building. I and a friend went into the house to see if anybody was there. Upstairs, where the shell entered, everything was in ruins, and on one side, a portion of the wall was still standing. On this part of the wall hung the crucifix, just chipped, as you see it now. I've seen this sort of thing many times. Buildings and churches wrecked, but crucifixes and figures of Christ untouched. We regard it as an omen, that I brought it along with me as a souvenir. Its value lies in all that it stands for, and not in its actual worth.
So I just wanted to tell you the story about my grandfather, my great-grandfather and my grandmother. Yeah. This is my great-grandfather, George, and he was in the First World War, and he died in 1916, April 1916. This was the card that he sent to my grandma, who was 2.5 years old when he died. And she also had a sister who was 1.5. And then their mother was expecting another baby. So this baby was born after he died. So this card is quite special. My grandma kept it in her, I think she had it in a drawer actually all her life. But the story is that she was so shocked by the news that she went blind, she lost her sight. I don't know how that happened. And then the little children couldn't be looked after by her anymore, so they got sent away to this workhouse. It's like an institution for people who couldn't look after themselves, I suppose. Yeah. That's a poem from my great aunt, who's the little sister of my grandma, who was not born until after her father died. Dad died in the war, which brought Mum many tears. What heartbreak. Then on the scene I appeared. Poor Mum, she was sick and then she went blind, but a sweeter and patient one you would not find. She kept us so clean and taught us right things, though life can be hard and great trials it brings. For young children need love, and in cases like ours, we had to help in all things, not much love could be ours. That's a bit like what he was saying this morning about the role reversal of the parents, because I think they had to look after their mother, actually, not their father, because he died, but their mother was then incapacitated by the illness.
We are going to Munich to take part in a special arts project and share our feelings about what we have done during the last 4 days.
Hallo, guten Morgen. Schön, dass ihr da seid.
Erinnerungsmarken uns erinnern, wenn Metallplaketten zusammenhängen.
Und da chain of the name tags.
Und wir schreiben darauf die Namen, die wir teilweise recherchiert haben, und zwar die Vornamen. Die Vornamen von Menschen, die im Krieg gefallen sind und auch solchen, die überlebt haben. Diese Kette, was mir und uns auch ganz wichtig ist, wird dazu dienen, dass wir sehen, dass Freund und Feind beieinander liegen. Es gibt keine wir und ihr, sondern es gibt ein Zusammen.
Nein, das müssen wir dann, ihr machen
Wir haben dann die Arbeit.
Okay.
The one that we were just talking about now has films from...
Ja, okay.
It's about the weight of the chain now.
It's a common experience, and we also want to say thank you to everybody, but to ourselves at the same time.